Hey everyone, I'm DDRKirby. You're listening to the Super Mega Zero soundtrack, and this is Pixelated Audio.
All right, welcome back to Pixelated Audio, a podcast focusing on game audio, its history, and the people behind it. We're your hosts. I'm Brian, and this is Gene.
Hey, everyone. We're actually joined by another guest today. This is DDRKirby, or Timmie, and we're going to be talking about and playing music from the game Super Mega Zero, which is a soundtrack that I fell in love with last year when I heard it just on a random release that you had put out, and I'm like, oh, this is amazing. And I just kept listening to it, and I was stewing like, I need to just reach out and have you on the show. It's so good. So welcome to the show, DDRKirby.
Yeah, thanks. Glad to be here, and glad you guys are enjoying my music.
Yeah, I've been listening to it nonstop all day while I work to prepare for this episode, and it is ingrained in me right now. Just a really awesome style and explosion of energy and just very colorful music. And so really excited to chat with you about this game today. Super Mega Zero is actually a really sweet game as well. And so it's going to be a lot of fun to kind of dive through this episode together.
Yeah, and that track that brought us in was titled Super Mega Zero, which is either played in the title or apparently in the trailer. I'll have to go back and double check, but basically it's the game is here music.
Cool. So Super Mega Zero was released for the PC and Switch in April of last year. It's a very colorful and energetic 2D precision puzzle platformer with shoot 'em up elements. If you've ever played anything like Celeste or Super Meat Boy or VVVVV, you'll be right at home because this has all of that action and twitch reflex that you would need for this kind of game. It's incredibly fun. I downloaded the demo and I played it today during my lunch. I've been listening to the soundtrack all day, so I feel like I understand it now.
It's a really fantastic game. It's a little bit hectic. I'm getting to the point where my reflexes aren't as good as they used to be, but I enjoyed what I played of it. We'll get into the mechanics later, but it's really cool because you don't always get all of your powers for every single level. Sometimes you have to like pick something up to get something that grants you the ability to jump or whatever, but it's really cool.
Yeah, and on that note, the visuals and the frantic pace action are perfectly complemented with this incredible soundtrack. So again, welcome to the show, DDRKirby. It's just it's great having you, and to be able to talk through some of these tracks is going to be a lot of fun. So why don't you tell us about how you get started? But before we do that, let's listen to one more track, and we'll be right back. This is Cyclic Oscillations. right, that was Cyclic Oscillations, composed by DDRKirby for Super Mega Zero on the Switch and Steam.
What a way to kick off the soundtrack, right? I mean, after the title theme, you just jump into this. I love this soundtrack so much. There's so many like great technical tricks on display, just wonderful chiptune writing. And, I want to hear about that, but tell us a little bit about yourself first.
Yeah, sure. So I'm DDRKirby. You guys can also call me Timmie. I go by Timmie as well. And I've been writing music since I think I've first started all the way back in 2004, but I really started to get more into it, around 2010. And that's when I first started doing something called 1 Hour Compo. And so 1 Hour Compo is a weekly composition competition event that happens every Thursday. And what happens is you get a theme on the website and you get 1 hour to compose a song and try to finish it up and upload it. And then we listen to it all afterwards.
Yeah.
And that was really great practice for both honing my production skills, my workflow, and it was also actually perfect practice for learning how to do commissions because, it's kind of the same deal. You get an assignment or a theme, and then you have to make a track based on it.
Excellent. What's your musical background?
That is an interesting question. So I dabbled a little bit in, classical music. I played a little bit of piano and flute, and I was in marching band. For any of you who have done that sort of stuff. But I think I always knew that my real heart was in creating music and writing music. And I think early on, I was always humming like Mega Man tunes to myself and like kind of like whistling melodies and kind of making my own chords and stuff. So I think video game music when I was growing up was a big inspiration. And I would just kind of during long car rides or, airplane flights, even like I would just kind of amuse myself by either listening or literally just, like humming it to myself in my head. So,
well, you've come to the right place. That's exactly our brand here. We love that. And I hear a lot of Mega Man in this soundtrack in, sort of bits and pieces. It's really cool.
It's got those really, really punchy, like micro eargasms that jump out and then it goes into this really beautiful kind of clean melody and then it pops right back in with these really strong chords and flourishes, and the tracks are just very, very colorful.
Yeah, there's a lot of techniques that you might recognize from Mega Man. I do use that sort of characteristic NES style triangle wave bass for both bass lines as well as kind of tom drum fills. And also kind of like some parts of the lead writing, just the use of like echoed pulse wave channels, stuff like that. So
yeah, and I also noticed that you tended to use a lot of I don't know how to put it, just this is going to be most evident in like the ending credits track, but the melodies are not Mega Man, but they have sort of similar compositional style to it. I don't know if you were using that as a reference point or if it was just sort of been knocking around your head for the last 20-something, 30 years.
I think probably part of it is just that's the kind of stuff that I grew up with and that I like. But I think for the credits theme, when we get there specifically, that was kind of more of a direct influence because I was like, all right, I want to make something that sounds like a credits theme. What does that sound like? So, yeah. But of course, my music is also a little bit separated from pure Mega Man chiptune in that like I make heavy use of delay and reverb, so everything sounds a lot more lush, and that's kind of why I've been describing my music as kind of 9-bit chiptune, as it were, to distinguish it from more traditional chip works, which constrain themselves to the limitations of sound chips.
And that's fair. I mean, we were listening to we did a show on Aqua Kitty a long time ago, and I feel like there's a lot of similarities between Electric Cafe and your style, where it is that the roots are in this very like 8-bit sound, but with more modern techniques and effects, stuff that we wouldn't have heard on the older hardware, but now we can actually make use of these different effects and stuff within the DAW. That's just, I guess, the natural progression of this kind of music, right? Is taking it that step further with the tools that you have available to you. So I think that it's really cool to see your spin on these classic tunes, almost in a way, but then with this kind of new life breathed into them. So let's get into our next track here. This is Pursuit of Infinity, and we'll be right back.
That was Pursuit of Infinity from Super Mega Zero, composed by DDRKirby. And I gotta say, one of the things that I really love about this soundtrack is that you kind of, in the spirit of that 9-bit sound of adding more sort of, texture and effects and all of these techniques, you also do the same kind of thing with that classic traditional looping music. Normally in old 8-bit music, it just loops twice, but you start to introduce new elements and you have all these great, time changes and rhythm changes, but little bits and bobs come up throughout the track, and it really does a great job of staying interesting the entire way through, which is, I think it works really great.
I think what I like about this track too is, to tack on to what you're saying about the looping, is that it's not just it's a great track in its own, but it really works with this game too, because it works with the level design, because there's like these kind of frantic patterns too that you're going through, and having this kind of like almost like rotating enemies or rotating around the map and stuff like that, and jumping back and forth. There is some repetition, and having this like kind of driving loop also just kind of adds to that a sense of, I guess, placement. So I really like the way that it turned out, especially in the gameplay. Yeah.
Could you tell us a little bit about kind of this style? I mean, I know you didn't just develop it for this game, but you've sort of been working on it for a while.
Yeah, I think, where do I even begin?
From the beginning.
I don't actually know how to answer this question. So I think a lot of it is around, as we said earlier, taking the chiptune elements like, square waves and stuff, and then putting them through delay and reverb, combining it with modern drums. I mean, it makes, I say it like it's really simple, but, really it's just something that I've kind of crafted over a number of years. And I think my style of composition is very much rooted in being very familiar with a core set of sounds and, you know, a little toolbox that I keep on coming back to. And I sort of just employ those same elements over and over again. And you can hear that in my work, where I'll use the same transition effects. Sometimes I'll reuse the same sort of fills, even sometimes the same sort of like arpeggio patterns. And you know, if it isn't broke, don't fix it, right? Like they still work out great. I think with this track in particular, this was the first track that I wrote for the soundtrack. And when Silkworm, the developer of the game, approached me and showed me some clips of the game, I was like, all right, I can do this one. Like, it's like the quick respawn times, and it just gets you right back into the action. And I was like, all right, I can do this one. You know, it sounds like I just do my normal thing, and it's going to work out great. And I think I'm pretty sure Silkworm made a specific request to have sort of a melodic through line through all of the original tracks. So, and you can hear that displayed very prominently in this track in like the very beginning, the da 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 da. So that little riff is going to show up again and again throughout different songs in the soundtrack. So be on the lookout for that.
Oh yeah. And I gotta say, in the spirit of game design, the economical use of a limited set of tricks, I think works in its favor here, because it's a very efficient game in that sense too. Like it, you know, introduces new tricks, but
there's a level of simplicity, is what you're trying to say. That
it's simple, but it's sophisticated. You know, it's yeah.
That's exactly it. And I think that is also kind of a love letter to your music too. Is there's a level of simplicity to it that makes it. And then when you add those different layers on, it makes it just so much bigger. And like the game. Did we ever mention the developer of this? You said the name Silkworm.
No, I wanted to talk about them after.
But yeah, let's make sure we bring them up before we forget.
Well, yeah, after we play another track, I wanted to talk a little bit about the developers and the game development process and all that. That works.
You want to get into our next track then?
Yeah, absolutely. So the next track that we're going to play is Irrational Space.
All right, that was Irrational Space, composed by DDRKirby. And I kind of got lost in myself there for a little bit. Everybody else was done, and I was still listening and just kind of jamming out. But yeah, a really good track. And I feel like I'm eating my feedback because I was saying earlier, there's like this level of simplicity. This track is just feels so much more complex. But I guess when you break it down into the individual components, maybe that level of simplicity is still there. I really like this track.
Yeah. I love all of the flourishes that you have in this, like, and I heard that motif, of course, come back right in the very beginning. That's sort of, da 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 thing. And then I feel like for me, what I love about the soundtrack is all of the parts just like click together so well. Like there's this really intricate percussion that's using those, classic 8-bit, almost like NES sounds. You've got these melody lines that are, I won't say simple, but they're very catchy. And then you also have all these wonderful textural elements that kind of come in and out, never feeling like it's overwhelming, but it's still like just this level of intensity and energy that's like almost consistent throughout, but you do still give room to breathe. It's just like, I wish all chiptune soundtracks had this level of polish to them. That's really good.
It is very polished.
Well, thanks for the compliments.
Yeah.
I do think that's something that works well with this. Like, so I do write music in other styles sometimes, especially for 1 hour compo. Mm-hmm. Recently, I've been experimenting with more like lo-fi chill hop stuff from time to time. But for this style of music specifically, it kind of all slots in because I'm using, kind of a limited palette of instruments. I kind of know where everything goes. The lead melody sits on top, the triangle wave bass line sits in the very bottom, and usually there's another mid bass that's below that. So like everything kind of has its own spot. Mm-hmm. And if I just do things kind of naturally as they occur to me, it'll all kind of fit in, and I already kind of know the system. And I've tried some other types of music. Like I remember long time ago, I was a little bit more into trying to write like trance music and stuff, and like that definitely wasn't the case. I had like monster super soft synths, and I was like, how the heck do I mix this well? So it wasn't as easy. So big respect to the guys who make that kind of music. But yeah,
that makes sense. So why don't we take this opportunity to talk a little bit about the devs, the companies involved. So the credits that I have are Silkworm and Rogue Games, the developers, and Rogue Games, the publisher. What can you tell us about those companies? I've never heard of them. How did you get involved with them? That whole story.
So Silkworm just reached out to me directly. So I think, I don't know if he's a one-man team, if he did everything, but it seems like he basically did most of the game, if not all of the game himself. Mm-hmm. Or hopefully I'm getting their pronouns right. But it seems like Silkworm did most of the game themselves. And I know about them because they competed they entered the same game jam that I did. So I think it was Ludum Dare or Ludum Dare, but they entered an LD, and I remember coming across their game. I don't remember. I think it's being called Shovelfall now. I don't remember if the demo had a different name. But I remember coming across their game jam entries, Shovelfall, and I was like, this is really sweet. This is like, has really good mechanics. It has that sort of like, it was kind of like this game, honestly. Mm-hmm. Maybe a little bit less polished because obviously, they made it in 48 hours. But it had a lot of the same vibe in terms of like quick restarts, get you back in the action, the same sort of pixel art aesthetics. And they reached out to me at some point and they were like, oh, I'm working on this game. I'm familiar with your work. They might have even played my Ludum Dare games as well. And so they were interested in working with me and they thought my music would be a great fit. I think they had already been using some of my existing works as, placeholder tracks for them. And they said it was working great. So that's how that happened.
Is that a pretty tight-knit community? Just as a quick question, I mean, are you these devs that you just reached out to, or did you already know about them beforehand?
I wouldn't say so. I feel like with Ludum Dare, it's very kind of decentralized, and you just kind of stumble across games randomly. Theirs just stood out because it was a really good game. I think it probably placed. I don't remember what it placed, but I'm sure it was pretty high up there.
Yeah. And that makes sense.
Is this like on like itch.io or?
So Ludum Dare actually runs on a separate website. There are a lot of game jams on itch.io, but Ludum Dare is a separate one.
Actually, on that note, aside from the game jams, you're talking about the 1 hour compos. Through what like what website or community are you doing those?
So that's run by that's hosted on a website called The Sauce, THA,
Gotcha.
and then SAUSC. But if you just search for 1 Hour Compo, you'll find us. And there's a website. We do it every Thursday. We used to host an IRC channel, but we've since migrated to Discord because times are changing.
Yes.
So but it's great. It's very chill, very low stress. You just come in, you can make music for an hour, and then you just hang out in the channel.
That sounds like a ton of fun. There's a lot of other sites that did like late night compos, 1 hour compos.
Yeah.
But yeah,
demo scene compos.
Yeah, a lot of the demo scene stuff, right? So
yeah. And I'm sure there's a lot of stuff, but I definitely owe all of my musical prowess to doing 1 hour compo consistently and regularly through. It's been like over 15 years now, or something like that. So you do something long enough, over and over again, you just and like when I first started doing 1 hour compo, I still remember I did my first song and I was like, all right, I gotta write something, and then it's like pretty short because like you only have 1 hour, right? And like I just like started, my track length just started getting longer and longer because I was just doing things faster and faster as I practiced, and I was creating templates so that I wouldn't have to set up everything every time. And then eventually I was just like, okay, 1 hour, I can crank out a 6-minute track, no problem.
That's pretty impressive, I have to say. I mean, I feel like, a 3-minute long track in an hour is already pretty good. So that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, of course. Sometimes you make literal use of copy and paste, but
well, sure.
But still same idea, right? It's
exactly. But since we are on the topic, this is actually a very organic place for me to cut this in. So I wanted to give our listeners a bit of a break from the soundtracks. It's so intense. I wanted to focus a little bit on one of your games that you put out soundtracks on your Bandcamp for both your monthlies, these things that you put out, the Ludum Dare stuff. So I wanted to play a track from the game Kiwis Can't Fly. Did I get that right? Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so this is the track I Love the Sky. I just played this. It's like a free browser game you could play. It's really cool. Let's play that track, and then we'll come back and talk a little bit about that game and just in general your experience as an indie game developer, not just as a composer. That was the track I Love the Sky from the game Kiwis Can't Fly, which this was an arranged version that Timmie sent us that had some of the cues in the game because they're sort of rhythmically synced to the...
Yeah, can you explain that
tell
a
us
little bit better?
about the game. I'm not going to explain it very well.
Yeah, sure. So this was a game that I made together with my good friend Kat Jia. We often work together. We actually have our own we publish under the label Coco Moss Games. So this is one of our productions as a team, as a couple. So in this game, the theme for the game jam was delay the inevitable. And we ended up making a game about a kiwi bird. And for those of you who don't know, kiwi birds can't fly. Hence the name of the game. And we made a game where you have this really cute kiwi bird who's just decides that they want to take a gander at what it's like to soar through the sky. And so they're falling, and there are various objects that you can drag to be in their path and bounce off of. And when that happens, you get a little bit of a delayed musical cue that plays in sync with the track. So that's what you were hearing with all the ba-da-ding and like da-da in the track that we just listened to.
I want to say it kind of goes, you mentioned earlier about the lo-fi kind of chill music that you like doing as well on the side, and this kind of goes along that vein a little bit. I want to say it's very...
Yeah, definitely. My experience with trying to experiment with that style definitely showed its way here. There's a lot of, and whenever I do that kind of style or this kind of music, I'm making a lot of use of very soft piano textures, some acoustic guitars. And there is very, very, very heavy use of Valhalla Supermassive, which is a reverb plugin, because I just want to wash everything out in it's almost like a cheat code, because it's like normally you just have a single guitar pluck and it just sounds kind of lame, but you wash it out in reverb and all of a sudden it sounds very poignant, right? And so that's kind of what I was going for here. I played this game just for a few minutes and I was smiling immediately. The music fits so perfectly. It's a lovely tune, but in context, that whole union makes it even better. The combination of the music and the gameplay just works so perfectly. So I wanted to bring that up specifically because I know you're working on something similar that's kind of like a bigger version of this. I'm talking about Rhythm Quest. Can you tell us about that project? Because it's super cool. Yeah, so Rhythm Quest is something that I've been working for a while. So this is my little baby. This is the indie game, full commercial indie game that I've been working on. It's got a little bit of a different vibe than Kiwis Can't Fly. It's going to be a little bit closer to Super Mega Zero in terms of its intensity. So Rhythm Quest is a game that combines, it's a rhythm game that takes some platformer elements. So it's a little bit like games like Bit Trip Runner or Muse Dash, in which you have a character that's running and you have to jump and attack and fly all to the beat, to the music. And of course, all the songs are composed by me. So it's going to have more of that lovely, 9-bit style soundtrack for you to go through these levels. I've been working on it for a couple years so far, as I mentioned, and so far I've gotten through 4 out of the 6 planned worlds in the game. Each world has some different mechanics, and they all get harder and harder. Of course, you can imagine these sorts of rhythm games tend to get really difficult as you go on. And so, yeah, I've been working on that. And if you want to find more info on that, you can go to rhythmquestgame.com, or you can just search for Rhythm Quest on Steam. You can wishlist it, and there is a free demo that you can play either on your PC or in your browser as well. And I'd really appreciate it if you could give it a follow or a wishlist on Steam. That really helps me out.
It looks super cool. For those that haven't heard of this, I mean, I'm a big fan. I see you have a Poppin' Music controller in the back of the camera there. I'm personally a big fan of rhythm games. I feel like if more games that could kind of synchronize music with gameplay. The Bit Trip Runner series is one of my absolute favorites of all time.
Oh, it's
Bit
really
Trip.
good. Yeah,
the whole Bit Trip series. Yeah. So I'm looking forward to this one. I only found out about it when I started to look more into your work, but even just watching the preview video that you have, I think on your YouTube, it looks like it's going to be a lot of fun.
Oh yeah, this looks amazing.
Yeah.
it's kind of like a side scroller, almost like a platformer in a sense, right?
Yeah. I mean, you don't control which direction you run or anything like that, but you do have to jump over spikes and then attack enemies all to the beat.
It looks really fun.
Yeah, it works really well. This is actually sort of a spiritual successor to a previous Game Jam game that I made called Ripper Runner. So I'm kind of using all the learnings that I've, had. I already know this kind of game is something that I can do and that can be fun for people. This is kind of like the next step to like making like a full game. And one of the really cool things about making this kind of game by myself is that, of course, it's a lot of work. I have to do all the artwork and all of the sound and all the coding and all the level design and charting and the community management and the marketing and all that stuff. But because I have to, because I get to do all that, it actually works a lot better than a lot of traditional rhythm games because I have full control over the music as well as the level design.
Yeah.
And so I can design the music around the game obstacles and around the charting so that it really fits precisely. And it's not like I just, picked some song that already existed and then made charts to it. So that really makes a big difference. And I think if you play the game, you'll immediately feel that difference right away.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. There's some of them that were, I forget what the one was, where it just like takes music from your library and generates charts. It's like a 3D, like you race a car kind of thing. It was like a big one a few years back.
Vib Ribbon did that.
That's true, but Vib Ribbon was almost more of like a weird art game where music happened to be a part of it. But it was still cool.
I think you're thinking about Audio Surf.
Yeah, Audio Surf was the one I was thinking, which was cool, but I felt like you're right. It didn't quite have that like synchronicity. Haven't used that word in a long time, between the music and the gameplay. And it was cool for a little while, but it didn't really hook me that much. But I'm looking forward to trying this out a lot.
Yeah, it's been really fun to work on. And hopefully, so my release date is, it's a release date. I have it as 2023 ? With an emphasis on the question mark, because you always know how these things, they always take longer than you expect. But hopefully I can, continue to work on it and make good progress. And again, if you want to stay up to date, I have a Discord server you can join if you want to hear about updates, or you can follow, my mailing list or everything.
We will put links in the show notes on the, how to wish list it on Steam and how to get to your Discord and stuff like that, as well as your, I think it's DDRKirby.com is the website, right?
Yes, that is my main website. You can find links to everything there. Yeah.
Cool. Well, I wanted to jump back into the game because we got a little bit more ground to cover there. So next up is Null Terminator from Super Mega Zero.
That was Null Terminator off of the Super Mega Zero soundtrack by me, DDRKirby.
I gotta say that groove on that is slick.
Ooh,
that is,
I love this one. Yeah.
It tickles me in all the right ways. It's such a good track.
Yeah, honestly, it was a real joy to work on this soundtrack because like this is really the kind of music that it's the kind of music that I really enjoy making, and it's also a kind of music that I know people want me to make more of. And I don't always get to do it because I'm, busy doing experiments with lo-fi Jill Hop and like random other stuff during 1 hour compo. So it's good. It's almost like I don't really make a lot of, original artist albums, but this is kind of what I would make if I were to. So it lined up perfectly that, I was commissioned to do this anyways. So it's like, okay, two birds with one stone, right? So
that's awesome. Have you considered maybe doing, like more than just some of the indie devs in your circle? Have you considered doing, more, I don't want to say like mainstream games, but yeah, mainstream games, or maybe something else that is, with a AAA publisher, or, I mean, is that something that you would be interested in or that you've tried to pursue, or I'm curious.
That's not really something I've tried to actively pursue. I mean, if they came up and reached out to me, I think that's something we could have a discussion. I feel like I'm not really mainstream enough to be approached for something like that. But
that's imposter syndrome talking, because I think you have the chops just like anybody else up there. So
well, yeah, I mean, like I know my music is really good. I just don't know if it's like what's mainstream and popular, right? So, but I do think, when it comes to like commission work and stuff, it is something that I do on occasion, but I try to actually steer people away from it, because like I want as much time as possible to work on my own music and to work on my own games and stuff. And so whenever anyone tries to approach me for like commissioning music, I'm like, okay, well, I am pretty busy, so please try and, I have like 1,000 songs that I've already written. Why don't you like take a look through all those, see if there's anything that fits what you're looking for. I bet there's, at least 1 or 2 tracks that you could use, because that just saves me time. And that way I can work more on Rhythm Quest. I can work more on my other albums and all that good stuff. So
that said, I do hope if in the future, kind of like Crypt of the Necro Dancer, you have a Rhythm Quest like DLC pack that's this kind of music, because like it would fit so perfectly. That would work. But I don't want to give you more work. Your first release hasn't even come out yet.
Yeah, I mean that being said, actually Silkworm has commissioned me to do the music for his for their next game demo. So ooh. I actually just finished that. That project.
Well, that didn't last very long. You didn't get any of the time yourself.
I try my best, but I figured, I already worked with this person, and it worked out great. And they didn't have a ton of work for me to do since it was just a demo, so I figured I could squeeze it in.
It's interesting. There's only been just a very small number of people that we've talked to that have been both developers and composers, and
it's tough. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm curious about like how you switch like your hats around on this, because I'm trying to look at it from like what you enjoy the most. Do you make the games specifically for your music, or are you interested in making the game and the music is just the accompaniment? Like what's your angle on this game development? I mean, obviously Rhythm Quest here, it's music centric, but is it something that you also really love the development side of stuff and the music is also just kind of the accompaniment, or the other way around?
So I think Rhythm Quest is kind of a special case, because Rhythm Quest really is, they're both really working as one unit. And so like I work on them simultaneously. Like I am thinking about the level chart while I'm making the music and making decisions on what tempo to make the music, how complicated to make the rhythms and everything, based on how hard I need the song to be. And like sometimes if I make the song too hard, I might have to go back and redo some of the melodies. So for Rhythm Quest, it's kind of special because it really is both of them are kind of forefront and together. For some of my other games, for a lot of the other games, it's more like, okay, I want to make a game first and then let's make the music second. But sometimes sometimes there is inspiration in the other direction, where especially when you're working on a game jam where you only have 72 hours, you can kind of burn out if you just kind of grind away at like the coding and the implementation for a long time. And sometimes when I work with Kat, my friend, you know, she needs time to like draw all the art. And so sometimes that's not ready. And so I'll have time to sneak away and go do some songs. And sometimes that can provide inspiration for kind of the feel of how, you know, a level should play or how a scene should go. And so there's that sort of like kind of almost how an artist would do some like sketchboarding or like a mood board. Mm-hmm. So sometimes I feel like doing some composition can serve that sort of mood board purpose and kind of give a feeling to what we're trying to do.
Yeah, it's cool that they can feed into each other that way, because I know with a lot of other indie game devs, we haven't talked to that many, but oftentimes I've heard that it's sort of like, well, I'm building this huge game and music is a consequence that has to be in there. So that's just another skill that they have to develop. But for you, you know, you've been working on music so long, it seems like they're kind of like pair skill sets for you, which is really cool.
Yeah, that's definitely true.
Did you learn programming specifically for making games, or is it something you do for your job? I'm curious.
No, that is something I do for my living, as a living as well. But for making games, it's interesting because like I never would have, I guess as I was growing up, I always thought like, oh, it would be really cool if I could like make my own video game someday, ha ha ha. But you know, back then it just seemed like that was just like not a that seemed similar to like the people who said like, oh, I want to like fly on a rocket to the moon someday. Like, it just seemed like it's something cool to say, but we can never really do it. But then somehow along the way, I kind of ended up gaining all the skills of, okay, I learned how to make music because I thought it was really cool and it was really fun. I learned how to program because it was something that I was just learning academically and as part of my job. Yeah. And I started to experiment with just making some really small games on the side. And then I learned pixel art because I needed something to draw for my monthly album covers. So I decided to learn pixel art for that. And then I, you know, started drawing more pixel art for, you know, my game jam games and stuff like that. So somehow along the way, I ended up with all of the requisite skills, even though I didn't set out to make a game. I didn't set out to learn those skills in order to make a game, but I ended up with all those skills. And now I'm like, oh, this is what I'm doing. I can actually do this. So
yeah. And you know, I wish you great success. I hope that you sort of like get that breakthrough moment, because I know when our listeners come and hear this show, they're going to be like, whoa, where did this come from? I had no idea. Like,
right. Like, how come I never heard of this before?
Yeah. And like, you're operating at a pretty high level. I mean, you're not just like, you know, this isn't your first game. So it may just be, you know, maybe it's Rhythm Quest, maybe it's the next project, but hopefully you'll start to get more projects and things like that, and the ball just gets rolling, because I want to see your music and your work more visibly in the future.
Absolutely.
Yeah, well, I mean, even if that doesn't happen, you know, the fans can always find my music, right? Like my Bandcamp will always have monthly releases.
True.
If you really like my music, I feel like I want to say, if you like my music, you're lucky, because I make a lot of it, and there's always going to be more, because I literally write a new song every Thursday. So there's always going to be more for you.
That's nice. Awesome. That said, let's take another music break here. This is Tritonal Tribulations. We'll be right back.
Track is too good.
Yeah, it's too good.
We're having too much fun over here. That was, go on, Brian.
That was Tritonal Tribulations. We lost Gene for a minute there. He was in his own world. I gotta say, like, this track is so good. It kind of makes me mad because, like, how can you have this much? Like, I don't get it. Like, how do you have this much talent in so many different areas, and yet you're continuing to put out something new every week? And you know, it's like, damn it, just share some of this skill.
This is what happens when you do the same thing every Thursday for, 10 plus years. Yeah. So I really like the middle section of this track, by the way, the really big chorus section.
I love it. I kind of had to force Brian's hand on this. I'm like, Brian, we should cover the show. I knew if I scheduled the interview, it would force him to listen to the soundtrack and have exactly that reaction.
Yeah. Well, so I'd never heard of your music until Gene brought it up, and then I was like, where has this been my whole life?
Yeah. And I was just saying. So I had to we had this conversation before the podcast started. I had to go really far back because I had reached out on a completely unrelated note to DDRKirby about something mag related, I think, in 2017. And it turns out that I had found the music through This Week in Chiptune, which was I think it was a weekly or a bi-weekly podcast where it was literally just like a DJ set or a playlist of chiptunes. And it was one of the few tracks that I liked so much that I went and sought out who is this artist? I got to find more from this person. And I ended up following you on Bandcamp. I think I bought an album.
And you found a lot more.
Yeah, exactly. And I found a lot more. And because you release so often, I get those Bandcamp notifications like DDRKirby has released another album. They don't say another in those notifications. But, it's like, so I would gradually,
they should.
They really should. I was just keeping up with it. And, I've bought some of your stuff over the past. And then when this one came out, I'm like, enough's enough. We just got to do this.
Yeah. You know what? This track, I got to say, there's some effects in there, especially maybe like a low pass filter or something like that, that gives me a little bit of I almost want to challenge you to do some C64 music, because I think you could do something. I think you could do something really wild for fun, and I would love to see that. This is very retro, C64 music. You got just a few channels to work with, and this really old raw sound that is beautiful. But I think the effects that the chip is capable of really would work in your favor, and I'd love to see what you could produce. So maybe someday when you get some free time, give it a go.
Who knows?
I could probably fake it. I don't work that. I always feel really. I think people who work with sound chips and people who work in Family Tracker are so cool, and I always listen to their stuff and I think it's amazing. But then I get into the software and I'm like, this is so slow. It takes forever. I can never do anything in 1 hour with this. I tried making songs in LSDJ once, and it was great for when I was on the plane and had nothing to do. But nowadays I boot that up. I'm like, this is gonna take forever. It's gonna sound great, but it's gonna take so long. I need to make my song in 1 hour and it needs to be 5 minutes long. Otherwise I'm not satisfied, right?
That said, this is something that I've wanted to ask since the beginning of the show, but what is your audio workstation like? Give us some details about what plugins you use, what software you use. I'm curious.
Yeah, so I'm actually all software, so I don't have a MIDI keyboard or anything, and I just use FL Studio, and I just input everything with keyboard and mouse, and that's kind of just what I've learned to do. I know some people work a lot better with their fancy launch pads and their keyboards and everything, but I just use my keyboard and mouse and I just sequence everything. And as far as plugins, it's really not that much. So most of the chiptune sounds is all just FL Studio's built-in 3 oscillator synth. God bless, that thing's amazing. I actually feed, so you can actually feed in custom waveforms to it, and so that's a lot of how I'm getting the NES style triangle waves for some of the leads and some of the basses. So you can use that. That's honestly, for my 9-bit stuff, that's most of it. I mentioned Valhalla Supermassive for when I want to get a really lush sound, but I didn't really use that here. It's just built-in three oscillator synth, lots of delay and reverb everywhere, smart EQ and mastering. But there's not a lot of other fancy instruments. And nowadays, when I do my other work, I am making use of some like contact patches and Flex. I'm actually using a lot of Flex. So FL Studio has a plugin called Flex, which is like perfect for when you're compoing, because I think it's a sample-based library where it just has a ton of different sounds, a lot of free ones that you can download. And I just kind of like have my favorite set. And that's kind of how I work with making music in general. I just have like those favorite sounds, and like when I pull up a plugin, it's useless to me unless I have like those 3 presets that I know like the back of my hand, and I was like, I need that preset because it's going to sound really good. And so that's kind of how I work.
Now I want to see like the DDRKirby FL Studio Masterclass YouTube video.
You can watch the live streams. I only tuned in for a few minutes, admittedly, but I did watch you do a little. Well, I think it may have been a pre-recorded one on YouTube, but you can watch some of that. Yeah.
Yeah. What I do is it's not super entertaining. I actually did some of these where I tried to do a voiceover, but usually, so what I do is every week when I do my 1 hour compo, I'll just record my screen as I'm making the music, and so you'll see the entire process of me taking the song from start to finish in 1 hour. And from beginning until export, and you can kind of see kind of like what my workflow looks like. And some people have said that it is actually very elucidating and illustrative to see, like, how are they doing this part? Like, how are they setting up this thing? Oh, there's some sort of keyboard shortcut that they're using that I don't know. So you can kind of see what it's like. I have it on my YouTube channel, so I usually post it. There's actually a playlist that I have that's just all of the making of videos of all my 1 hour compos.
Yeah, and that's a really educational thing. I'll also post a link to those, because I think musicians can sometimes be a little bit cagey about showing too much of their process, but I'm glad that you're very like open about it. You share your process, and like I said, your Bandcamp is full of hundreds of songs, and it's just so cool to see that like growth and development. You have tracks going back to I think 2012, 2011, maybe.
Yeah,
so like
I think even earlier, but we don't talk about those other ones. But.
Well, we all have embarrassing first projects. That's nothing.
It's actually really funny. I think from my very first monthlies album. It's like 2004. Yeah, 2004. July 2004. I have a Sparkman remix from Mega Man 3 that I submitted to OC Remix, and it got promptly rejected because it sounds like crap and like the mixing is terrible and everything. But one of my patrons on Patreon actually requested a Sparkman remix recently. So
comes full circle.
Yeah, it comes full circle. So almost 20 years later, I'm probably going to try and tackle that source again and actually do it justice this time.
Nice. Well, I want to jump into our next track, but we're an hour into the show plus, and we have barely talked about the game, so this will be probably the best time to do it. So this next track is Infinity.
All right, that was Infinity from Super Mega Zero, composed by DDRKirby.
And I will point out that song was one of my 1 hour compositions. So that song was made in an hour.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And you did not write that for this game, as I think you were saying early before we started, right?
Yeah, this was one of my previously existing compositions. I made this one. I made this one in 2014.
Oh wow, even going back a bit. So
Yeah.
Brian asked a critical question that I'm sure you're tired of answering, but what does the ISQ stand for, or does it mean anything at the end of your DDRKirby?
Yeah, so technically it stands for IO Squad, but that doesn't actually mean anything, really. So this was back when I was, trying to figure out an alias for myself. We called them screen names back then. And I was like, all right, well, I like Dance Dance Revolution, so I like DDR, and I really like Kirby, so let's say like DDRKirby. Yeah, that works. But then I was like, oh, what if someone else has the same idea, right? What if someone else takes DDRKirby, then I won't be able to get it. So why don't I just add, some like random clan tag or something at the end, right? That way I make sure that I'm unique. You can always find me by searching for DDRKirby ISQ. Of course, later on, I didn't realize, that I would, become a musician on Bandcamp and have my own website and all that stuff. So now whenever you search for DDRKirby, of course you get me. You don't get anyone else. But
I still don't get it.
How was I supposed to know that, right?
Well, it'd be like if you wrote like, 111 at the end, and now it's just like there. You're just stuck with it.
No, I know. I got that much.
No, so admittedly, I've only played the demo, but the game itself is just, first of all, the graphics have a lot of really great personality. Everything's kind of like bouncing around. But what I really love about it is that it's kind of like, it literally is like VVVVV mixed with Celeste. Like your character, it's a little zero, like the number, the numeral, and you pick up all these various power-ups. Some of them grant you the ability to jump a limited number of times. If you grab a 2, you can jump twice. If you grab an infinity, you can jump an infinite number of times. If you get legs, you can... There's like a leg power-up, I think. There's like all these little
and you have to collect
things.
the little pies.
Yeah, those are like bonuses. You can collect a pie because, it's an irrational number. Everything else is usually whole numbers. There's a inversion power. So you grab a polarity, like a plus or a minus. So like literally like V, you get flipped. So you're now walking on the ceiling and you jump up from the ceiling, in an inverted parabola until you switch arc again. And then you're now on the ground jumping, which screws with my brain a little bit every time that happens. But
big time.
No, it's such a cool game, and not every level relies on every single mechanic. So you don't always have every tool in the tool bag, but it's really, really cool. I don't know if you wanted to add any more to that, because I'm just going from my experience. Have you even played the game? You said you hadn't played it much.
I actually admittedly have not played it. I've been meaning to ask Silkworm for a Steam key so I can actually play it, but I just haven't gotten around to it.
Download the demo. That's what I did.
I've been too busy. I've been too busy working on Rhythm Quest. I've been playing that a lot. So I set up. It's funny. I set up the Steam integration for Rhythm Quest so that when I'm playing the game, it shows like DDRKirby is playing Rhythm Quest, and I have like an ungodly amount of hours logged on Rhythm Quest, because like whenever I'm like developing the game, it just logs me as playing the game. So I have like, when the game launches, I'll have like 16,000 hours on Rhythm Quest before anyone even plays it.
I can't wait to try out the demo.
That definitely puts the number of hours into perspective.
How much of the demo can you play?
So you can play the first, not the first 9 levels, but you can play 9 levels from the first, scattered across the first 3 worlds of the game. Mm-hmm. The full game, there's going to be 30 levels in the main kind of campaign, and then there's going to be some like bonus levels, kind of like Guitar Hero. They have like bonus levels of DLC and all that stuff. So can
you explain a little bit? I know you kind of touched on it, but can you explain a little bit how the mechanics work for this?
Yeah, so at the beginning it's very simple. There's spike pits that you need to jump over to the beat, and then there's these red enemies. There's the basic enemies. You just need to slash them one time. And then as you go on, there's flying red enemies. So then you need to jump, and then you need to attack half a beat later. So it's a jump attack.
Okay, and so while you're doing these kind of combos of different moves, it matches up perfectly with the rhythm that's behind it, or is
that's
this
correct.
Creating the rhythm?
it's matching up with the rhythm that plays, and so like it's pretty cool because I've had people say that even though they thought they were no good at rhythm, they were just relying on sort of the more platformer visuals to time their actions, and they were like, oh, well, I'm not really intentionally being on the beat, I'm just kind of playing it as a platformer, but it's really satisfying because it just happens to line up with the music. And so you can kind of use both to inform each other. So you can either use the music cues, especially like if you're having trouble on a section, you'll hear it again and again, and you'll kind of like be able to hum the rhythm in your head, and that'll help you with the timing of the hits. So you can use either way.
For the listeners, just to be clear, we have switched to talking about Rhythm Quest. We're not talking about Super Mega Zero, which is also very challenging and probably has some rhythm aspects to it just from the technical difficulty. But speaking of Rhythm Quest, one thing that I thought was really cool from the demo that I saw was like you have water, I guess, that kind of slows your character down.
Yeah.
You can explain it better than I can.
Yeah, so that's one of the more advanced mechanics. It shows up all the way in World 4, so that's not in the demo, unfortunately. But so it slows the scrolling speed, so it's kind of a different... something else that it does is it makes your jumps longer, right? Because when you jump in water in video games, you're all floaty and stuff. So it does make the jumps twice the length, and that actually creates some interesting reading challenges for... because there's also like air jumps and like flight paths and all this crazy stuff. I think World 5 is going to have enemies where you need to like jump and attack at the same time. Oof. And then World 6 is going to have speed zones where like instead of slowing you down, it speeds you up, and that's going to have like triplet rhythm. So that's going to be really fancy. But
wow,
yeah, you can look forward to that.
I got to say, I'm looking at the videos of it, and at first I thought it was like a single character, but it looks like depending on the world, I guess your character either transforms or you actually play as somebody. Like I'm looking, you're playing as a duck.
So that one's, so it's actually not, it doesn't change on the world. Those are actually just unlockable, cosmetic skins. I just featured them all in the demo because I wanted to show off, all the content that the game has.
That makes sense.
I'm digging that duck.
Yeah, everyone likes Ducky. It's actually, I had some pet ducks, so it's based on one of my pet ducks, my former pet ducks. Yeah, her name is Ramen.
Oh, nice. I see. There's a Nyang cat. There's a Ronin. Yeah,
there's Furball. There's actually a lot of cameos from previous games of mine. So if you've played my previous games, you'll see a lot of the same characters. It's fun.
Nice,
awesome, and that'll be available for Windows and Mac, correct?
So it'll be on Windows, Mac, Linux, as well as it'll be available on mobile. It actually works really well on a phone because it's only 2 buttons, so you can tap the left or right side of the screen. So it'll be on iOS and Android. And I'm also working on a Switch port as well.
Awesome.
Wow.
Yeah.
That'll be great.
I've heard that the demo works really well on Steam Deck as well.
Oh, very cool. Yeah.
You know what would be really neat is and I'm just throwing this ideas out at you, not that you're not busy enough, but there's a big crowd, especially I kind of follow it every now and then for physical releases of Switch games. Limited Run Games does a lot of things. Humble does some stuff. They release like a physical edition where it comes with an instruction manual, soundtrack, all this stuff. I just feel like this would work so well for what you do and what you have to offer. That it would be a really cool collectible.
Yeah, but if it does well enough, that would be really cool to see.
Especially a soundtrack CD would go really well.
I'll definitely have a soundtrack CD. That's for sure. Yeah.
Awesome. I do want to jump into our next track, and this is our second to last track, or rather, I guess our last track before we wrap up the show. This is Midnight Marauder, again, from Super Mega Zero.
All right, that was Midnight Marauder off of the Super Mega Zero soundtrack by me, DDRKirby. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the soundtrack so far.
It's all right. Just kidding.
Yeah.
It's really good. It's really good. Now, you had mentioned while we were listening that this just isn't up to your current production value. I'm curious what you meant by that.
I can tell like from listening to this track, and also because I know it. Like this is something that I wrote a long time ago. I'm trying to remember what. I don't even remember when, but I can tell that like some of the mixing is not quite there, and like it's just I've learned a lot more about audio production and how to make things sound crisp and how to make things sound good. You can tell that all the melody stuff is still kind of the same. I've still kind of kept that sort of in terms of chord progressions and lead melodies and kind of what I like melodically. That's kind of all similar, but in terms of like it's really loud and overcompressed and stuff like that. And it doesn't have that crispness, I guess.
Well, you notice it, we don't, because that polish. I think all of your tracks, even these older tracks that you have, they still sound like your music, and they still sound polished to me.
And they still sound very cohesive. I mean, even the tracks that you said were not written for this game, definitely to me sound like, okay, so you just had different, melodic material, but I can see this working just fine in context.
That's true for sure. Yeah.
Cool. Well, I think we're kind of ready to wrap up the show here. Today we covered Super Mega Zero, composed by DDRKirby, and this was released for Switch and PC last year in April 2022.
Yeah, for a mere $10, it's a great game for not that much money. If you're interested in picking it up, it's a steal.
Download the demo, try it out, see if you like it. If you want to know more about the show, you can find us online at pixelatedaudio.com for the show notes, everything you heard today from DDRKirby, where to find their music, where to find, Rhythm Quest that's coming up. We'll have all of that in the show notes. And you can also find us on Discord and, chat with friends and join the community.
Did you have anything else you wanted to say just in general? We've done a lot about plugs, and I wanted to give you that opportunity to chat since obviously you're an indie game dev and you're a composer. You've got a lot of cool projects going on, but any other things you want to talk about or plugs?
I think we pretty much covered it. I just want to say, hopefully someday you'll have me back on covering my own soundtrack. That would be really cool for Rhythm Quest.
In fact, will hold you to that, because when Rhythm Quest comes out, I'm gonna call it right now. Like, we're gonna have you on an episode. Let's not forget and write it down and get your stamp on it so that we can make sure that this is a happening thing. Because I can't wait to go through that game.
Yeah, it'll be fun.
Yeah, and if it's if the production and quality is anything like this, what I've heard of it so far has already sounded great. I think it's going to be an awesome show, and listeners of our show know that we cover all sorts of music, and I'm sure we're going to get people to say, when is that game coming out? So DDRKirby's back on. But
yep.
In the meantime, I think that about wraps it up. I don't know. Did you have any other things that you wanted to cover, Brian?
No. If you're new to the podcast, you can check out some of our past shows. We just did. What did we do? I think.
What is it? Kebitai. I can't pronounce it.
Oh, yeah. Kebitai Uchu SDF Canyon Mid with George Stone.
Yeah. We talked about Canyon.mid. We talked with WASD. We've been doing a lot of PC music lately. We had our wonderful back-to-back expansion packs about, adult games and golf, which, thanks to Craig Stadler, had a little bit more in common than they needed to. But
yeah.
Yeah, don't listen to that one. Well, actually, there's nothing like racy about that show. It's just it's fun.
It's a good show. There's a lot of really great music.
It was.
And that being said, we got one track taking out the show. This is called Sequential Success. DDRKirby, can you tell us a little bit about this track before we wind down here?
Yeah, this was commissioned as the credits or, ending theme. And so I wanted to draw inspiration from, something you'd see at the end of a Mega Man game. Oh, man, I want to play Mega Man now. But yeah, so you're going to hear that it's a little bit closer to straight 8-bit compared to, like my the rest of the soundtrack, where it's kind of like have a lot of delay and reverb. There's going to be a little bit more straight 8-bits, and it's going to kind of give you that kind of nostalgic feel where, all right, you just finished sitting in front of your living room TV, and you just finished beating Mega Man, and this is the kind of like credits rolling. So
Awesome. Well, DDRKirby, Timmie, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us. It was a pleasure having you on. Amazing music, and we wish you the best of luck with Rhythm Quest and your other future endeavors. Again, can't state enough how impressive just your everything that you're doing is, from dev to composition, and looking forward to all the next stuff coming up. That said, our last track here is Sequential Success, composed by DDRKirby. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you back in a few weeks for the next episode.